What if the treehouse you're playing in isn't empty? These stories will make you think twice before climbing into one ever again. Nestled deep within the shadowy confines of an ancient forest stood an old treehouse. It was no ordinary childhood refuge, but a relic of long-forgotten craftsmanship. Its wood was blackened with age, and the jagged ladder creaked ominously with every gust of wind. Legends whispered among the locals spoke of strange happenings surrounding the structure, but such warnings often fell on the deaf ears of thrill seekers. When Emily, a bold yet skeptical college student, visited her grandparents' countryside home, she stumbled across the treehouse on a hike. The forest's dense canopy cast eerie shadows, but the sight of the structure piqued her curiosity. She decided to climb up, ignoring the unsettling stillness around her. The air grew colder as she ascended. The final rung of the ladder gave a peculiar groan, almost like a warning. When she reached the platform, she found the inside of the treehouse oddly untouched. Faded drawings lined the walls, showing stick figures in crude shapes, yet there was something off about them. The figures weren't smiling. Their eyes were black holes, and the shapes surrounding them resembled looming shadows. Emily shook off her unease, telling herself it was just childish scribbles. Then she noticed something peculiar, a faint whispering sound. It was soft at first, like the rustle of leaves, but grew distinct. The whispers seemed to form words, beckoning her deeper into the treehouse. Stay. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, straining to hear more. The whispers, layered with voices, were incoherent, yet chillingly intimate, as if the trees themselves were speaking to her. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through, carrying with it a faint giggle, a child's giggle. Emily's instinct was to leave, but something rooted her in place. She began exploring, feeling an unnatural pull. She found an old notebook beneath a pile of debris. Its cover was cracked and weathered, but its pages were perfectly legible. Inside were diary entries from a boy named Thomas. The entries described his excitement about building the treehouse, but soon took a dark turn. June 14th. Something is wrong with the treehouse. At night, it whispers to me. Mom doesn't believe me. June 21st. The shadows come alive here. They're friendly at first, but now they want me to stay forever. I'm scared. Emily's pulse quickened as she flipped through the pages. The final entry read, July 3rd. I told the shadows no. They didn't like that. I hear them coming. If anyone finds this, don't stay here. Don't let it take you. Suddenly, the treehouse creaked violently, as if reacting to her discovery. The whispers surged, louder and more chaotic, drowning her thoughts. A shadowy figure darted in her peripheral vision. Spinning around, she saw nothing but the empty space beyond the window. Yet, the oppressive feeling of being watched intensified. Emily scrambled to the ladder, desperate to escape, but as she gripped the rung, a chilling sensation crawled up her arm. She looked down and gasped. Shadows writhed along her skin, creeping like living tendrils. They whispered directly into her ears now, their voices filled with malice. Stay with us, Emily, forever. Tearing herself away, she stumbled down the ladder, landing awkwardly on the ground. She didn't look back as she bolted through the forest, her breath ragged and her heartbeat deafening in her ears. The whispers followed her, echoing in the rustling leaves and snapping branches. It felt as though the forest itself was alive and intent on keeping her. Finally, she burst into the clearing near her grandparents' house, collapsing on the porch. Her grandparents rushed to her side, alarmed by her ashen face and trembling body. Between gasps, she recounted what happened, expecting them to laugh or dismiss her. Instead, their faces grew grave. Her grandfather nodded slowly. That treehouse has a history. It's been there for over a century, built by a family who disappeared without a trace. People have tried to tear it down, but anyone who does falls ill or worse. Best leave it alone. Child, Emily spent the night tossing and turning, plagued by nightmares. She dreamed of the treehouse, its walls closing in as shadowy figures with hollow eyes whispered her name. When she woke, she found scratches on her arms, as if something had tried to drag her back. Determined to end the torment, Emily researched the treehouse's origins. The family her grandfather mentioned had built it as a safe haven, but they'd vanished mysteriously. Rumors claimed the tree was cursed, harboring an ancient spirit that demanded sacrifice. Those who lingered too long in the treehouse became part of the shadows, their souls trapped eternally. Armed with this knowledge, Emily resolved to confront the entity. She returned to the forest, this time with salt, a lighter, and sage. The treehouse loomed above her, more menacing than ever. It would seem to pulsate, alive with malevolence. Climbing back inside, she immediately felt the oppressive air. The whispers returned, mocking her efforts. Lighting the sage, she walked the perimeter, chanting prayers she'd hastily memorized. The shadows recoiled at first, but then they retaliated. The temperature plummeted, and the shadows solidified into grotesque forms with elongated limbs and hollow eyes. Emily stood her ground, encircling herself with salt. The shadows clawed at the invisible barrier, their whispers now guttural screams. She threw the lighter onto the old wood, setting the treehouse ablaze. The flames consumed the structure rapidly, the shadows shrieking as they were engulfed. As the fire roared, Emily felt a weight lift from her chest. The whispers faded, replaced by a haunting silence. She fled the forest, the glow of the fire lighting her path. The next day, all that remained of the treehouse was ash and charred wood. Emily's nightmares ceased, but she would always carry the memory of the cursed treehouse and the malevolent shadows that dwelled within it. The forest seemed quieter now, as if relieved of its dark secret. But deep within the ashes, a single, unburned plank lay untouched. A faint whisper echoed through the clearing. "Stay." In the quiet town of Willow Creek, there was a patch of woods locals referred to as the Vale. The air there always felt thicker, the trees taller, and the shadows deeper. In the heart of the Vale stood an abandoned treehouse, perched precariously atop an ancient oak. It had belonged to the Hawthorne family decades ago, but tragedy struck when their youngest child, Lily, vanished without a trace while playing there. Her disappearance left the town shaken, and the treehouse was left to rot, swallowed by the forest. Jake and his friends, eager thrill seekers, decided the treehouse would be the perfect spot to film their ghost hunting vlog. The idea was simple: spend the night in the infamous treehouse and see if the tales about it were true. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and bravado, the group set off into the Vale as the sun dipped below the horizon. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the crunch of their boots on the underbrush. As they approached the treehouse, Jake felt an inexplicable chill. The structure loomed before them, its wood warped and blackened with age. The ladder leading up swayed slightly, though there was no wind. "Creepy as hell," muttered Eric, the group's skeptic. He pointed his flashlight up. "But hey, that's good for views." Jake hesitated but forced a grin. "Let's do this." One by one, they climbed the ladder. The planks groaned under their weight, and every creak seemed to echo through the forest. Inside, the treehouse was empty except for a few cobwebs and a scattering of broken toys. The air was suffocatingly still. Jake set up the cameras, their red recording lights glowing like tiny eyes in the dark. As the hours dragged on, nothing happened. The group laughed nervously, teasing each other for jumping at shadows. But then, at midnight, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature dropped abruptly, and the flashlights flickered. A low hum filled the air, so faint it was almost imperceptible, but it crawled under their skin. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, clutching Jake's arm. Before he could respond, the camera nearest the window toppled over. Eric cursed, rushing to pick it up, but froze halfway. His flashlight beam had caught something outside. It was quick, a shadow darting between the trees. "Probably an animal," Eric muttered, though his voice wavered. The group gathered at the window, peering into the darkness. At first, there was nothing, but then they saw it, a figure standing just beyond the tree line. It was small, childlike, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. As their flashlights found it, the figure melted back into the shadows, leaving only the rustle of leaves. "What the hell was that?" Sarah hissed, her voice trembling. "Let's just stay calm," Jake said, though his heart pounded. He adjusted one of the cameras, aiming it toward the forest. "We came here to find something, right?" "Well, we just did." The group tried to brush it off, but the unease grew. Shadows seemed to pool in the corners of the treehouse, darker and denser than they should have been. Eric's flashlight died suddenly, and as he fumbled for new batteries, the hum returned, louder this time. "Lily." The whisper was faint, but unmistakable. The group froze, their eyes darting around the room. "Did someone just say something?" Eric asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "That wasn't us," Sarah said, clutching Jake's arm tighter. "It sounded like a child." "This isn't funny," Eric snapped. "If one of you is messing with us." "We're not," Jake said. "Just stay calm." But staying calm was impossible. The whispering continued, growing louder and more insistent. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The shadows writhed, taking on shapes that danced just out of sight. Sarah screamed as a cold hand seemed to brush against her ankle, but when she looked down, nothing was there. "We need to leave," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Not yet," Jake insisted. "We can't leave without proof." As if in response, the treehouse shook violently. The group huddled together as the floorboards groaned and the walls seemed to close in. One of the cameras toppled over again, its lens shattering. Then, from the far corner of the room, a shadow began to rise. It was amorphous at first, but as it grew, it took on the shape of a child. "Lily," it whispered, its voice layered and distorted. The figure stepped forward, its features becoming clearer. It was a little girl, her eyes hollow and her skin pale as moonlight. She stared at them, her expression blank, but her presence radiated sorrow and rage. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice echoing unnaturally. We just wanted to know what happened to you," Jake stammered. The girl tilted her head, her hollow eyes narrowing. "They took me. The shadows took me. Now they want you." As she spoke, the shadows surged forward, engulfing the room. The group screamed, scrambling for the ladder. Jake was the last to climb down, his heart hammering as the whispers rose to a deafening crescendo. When his feet hit the ground, he turned to look up. The treehouse was empty, but in the window, the shadowy figure of Lily watched them, her expression unreadable. The group ran through the forest, the shadows chasing them until they broke into the clearing. They didn't stop until they reached Jake's car. As they sped away, the whispers faded, but the fear lingered. The next morning, Jake reviewed the footage, hoping to make sense of what had happened. Most of it was corrupted, the images distorted, and the audio filled with static. But in one clip, just before the camera fell, Lily's face appeared, staring directly into the lens. The video never made it online. Jake and his friends never spoke of the treehouse again, but they all knew one thing. The shadows beneath it were alive, and they were always watching. In the sleepy town of Ravenwood, there stood an ancient treehouse nestled in the heart of a sprawling oak tree. Unlike the bright, cheerful hideouts of childhood memories. This treehouse exuded a sinister aura. Its warped wood was blackened with age, and strange carvings adorned the walls, symbols that no one in the town could decipher. The locals avoided it at all costs, claiming it was cursed. Legends spoke of the Carrigan family, who had built the treehouse generations ago. One by one, members of the family fell to misfortune, accidents, disappearances, and madness. The last known Carrigan, a boy named Peter, vanished without a trace one stormy night. Since then, the treehouse was left to rot, becoming a forbidden relic of the town's dark past. When 16-year-old Claire and her best friends, Ethan and Laura, stumbled across the treehouse during a summer hike, they felt an inexplicable draw to it. The air around the tree felt heavier, charged with an unsettling energy. Claire hesitated, but Ethan's curiosity got the better of him. "It's just an old treehouse," Ethan said, grinning as he climbed the rickety ladder. "What's the worst that could happen?" Laura rolled her eyes, but followed him. Claire lingered at the base of the tree, her instincts screaming at her to stay away. Yet, something compelled her to climb after her friends. Inside, the treehouse was eerily intact despite its age. Dust coated every surface, but the structure felt sturdy. The walls were covered in faded drawings, and the same cryptic symbols etched into the exterior. A child's wooden toy rested in the corner, untouched by time. "This place is creepy," Laura muttered, shivering despite the warm summer air. "It's just old," Ethan said, though his voice lacked conviction. He picked up the toy, turning it over in his hands. "See? Nothing to be scared of." As he spoke, a low groan reverberated through the treehouse. The walls seemed to tremble, and a faint whispering filled the air. It was faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but grew louder, more distinct. The voices overlapped, speaking in a language none of them recognized. Claire's chest tightened. "We need to go." Before anyone could respond, the trapdoor slammed shut. The treehouse plunged into darkness as their flashlights flickered and died. Panic set in as the whispers grew into a cacophony of voices, some pleading, others mocking. "What's happening?" Laura cried, pounding on the trapdoor. Ethan's flashlight flickered back to life, casting long shadows across the walls. But the shadows didn't align with their movements. They twisted and writhed, taking on grotesque shapes. One by one, the shadows turned their hollow, glowing eyes toward the group. "Get away from the walls," Claire screamed. The shadows stretched toward them, claw-like tendrils reaching out. Ethan swung his flashlight wildly, the beam scattering the nearest shadow, but it reformed instantly. Laura clutched Claire, tears streaming down her face as the whispers became words. "Stay with us." Ethan threw the wooden toy at the nearest shadow. It passed through harmlessly, landing with a dull thud. The shadows advanced, forcing the group into the center of the room. Claire's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then she noticed the symbols on the walls glowing faintly, pulsating with a sickly green light. "The carvings," she shouted. "They mean something." Ethan turned his flashlight toward the symbols, and the shadows recoiled slightly. Encouraged, Claire scrambled to trace the shapes with her finger, mimicking their patterns in the air. The whispers faltered, replaced by an angry hiss. The shadows surged forward, but as Claire completed the final symbol, a blinding light erupted from the carvings. The shadows shrieked and dissolved into the walls. The trapdoor creaked open, letting in the pale light of the moon. Gasping for breath, the group stumbled out of the treehouse and climbed down the ladder. They didn't stop running until they were far from the cursed tree. Back in town, they tried to explain what had happened, but no one believed them. The treehouse became an unspoken secret, its curse still lingering. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they had only delayed the inevitable. Late at night, she could still hear the whispers, faint and inviting. Deep in the woods, the treehouse remained, waiting for its next visitors. And beneath it, the shadows stirred, hungrier than ever.